In the beginning. Should have warned y'all about the nudity in this area. I was born on October 9th, 1950 at 5:12 a.m. at the Bullitt County Hospital in Statesboro, the second child of J.G. Altman and Christine Rogers Altman. My parents were truly working class folks who were among the people in the post-war years who strived to work hard to move up in the world. They had both grown up relatively poor and were both determined that they would work hard enough, smart enough, and long enough to be somebody in town and reach that next level of folks whose children had it better than they did. And indeed, we did. Not that there were not difficulties. My earliest memories were of the Bullitt County Hospital, where I was taken after a tragic accident that left me with a critical head injury. I was supposed to have died, my mama said, but the doctors and the good Lord saved me. I had lots of attention at the hospital. The first book that I remember was one that was given to me while I was at the hospital. Do y'all know about Digger Dan? All right, Digger Dan. Well, I had the book Digger Dan, and Digger Dan was a steam shovel, and there was one just like him outside the window, the hospital window. So I could watch them and read Digger Dan and then see Digger Dan out my window. Perhaps being able to connect the story of Digger Dan with real life goings on at the hospital encouraged me to understand the importance that books could have in my life. In any case, I did fall in love with books. So when I got taken back home finally, my parents were told that I could not hit my head and I should not get hot. Okay, can't hit you. Now I'm 3.5 years old. She can't hit her head, and I got a brother that's about 1.5 years older. She can't hit her head and she can't get hot. I still don't like to get hot. So we got window units for my bedroom and the main room that I would be in, and that main room was my mama's little beauty shop, her home beauty shop. She moved my high chair into the shop, and I remained there with her and all the ladies. They helped me, and they held me in their laps. They interacted with me, and they read books to me. All the women just about, were either faculty members at Georgia Teachers College, which was right across the street from our little house, or were wives of teachers at Georgia Teachers College. So these were educated women who valued reading, writing, and good conversation. And a once extremely shy little girl bloomed into a gregarious, talkative, curious little girl. I thank these ladies and my mom for sharing her work with me. When I was 5, we moved across town on Woodrow Avenue, just 1 block away from First Baptist Church. I loved that split level on Woodrow Avenue. We lived upstairs, and my mom's beauty shop was downstairs. It was now big enough to have 3 or 4 hairdressers. And Mama became the most sought-after beautician in town. It wasn't just the college people coming, other people coming. So the shop provided me a place to work after school and in the summer. And I worked diligently, sweeping hair, handing rollers to the hairdressers, booking appointments, and when I was older, doing the payroll. Even so, there was plenty of time to play, and my brother and I to roam the neighborhood, and we did. We not only roamed the neighborhood, but we older, we roamed the town. We walked our motorbikes all over Statesboro. And there was a pharmacy, medical center pharmacy, that started staying open on Sunday afternoons and welcomed all of us to come and hang out at their snack shop and read the comics for free. Well, it's pretty smart of them to do that because later when we were baby boomers, we were still doing our business with them, I guess. But we read the comics for free. So, and we roamed to other places all over town too. As we could, by the way, as white kids. It was sort of that, like a Norman Rockwell kind of growing up. You see those pictures. That's what it was like for me. Now, though the medical center pharmacy became a Sunday afternoon hangout, my biggest spot to hang out with is First Baptist Church. It was just a block away, and my parents were members of First Baptist Church. Since it was just a block away, I could easily walk to all the activities. I was there just about any time the doors were open. And even if they were not having religious activities, my friends in the neighborhood and I would have fun exploring various parts of the church that were generally off limits. Like we'd swim in the baptistry. Yeah, we did. And we'd go across and climb to the steeple, ring the bell, that kind of thing. For the most part, though, I was a good little Baptist. I was. Attending sunbeams for preschoolers, then girls' auxiliary, children's choir, plus Sunday school every time they had Sunday school. That was every morning before church, and training union before the evening services. I had good Sunday school teachers, for the most part, and believed everything they told me. Everything. During a revival service when I was 9 years old, I walked down the aisle to take Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior, and I joined the church. I was baptized later by longtime minister J. Robert Smith. I remember feeling a bit disappointment that after the baptism, all I felt was wet. But nevertheless, I was a baptized believer, and I vowed that I would be a good Christian. When I was 12 years old, I walked down the aisle again and rededicated my life, as if a 12-year-old needed to do that. But I did, because I wanted to make an even stronger commitment. And that's kind of got me in trouble, I guess. For you see, I became so committed that I decided to really study the Bible, all of the Bible, not just what the Sunday school teachers taught us in Sunday school. And I did that. Now, here I was then, studying the Bible, and found out there were a lot of contradictions in the Bible, and there were a lot of weird things in the Bible that just didn't seem too holy to me. Soon after, in the 8th grade, we started studying Norse mythology in our English class, Miss Roach's English class. So here I was reading the Bible and wondering about the strange things I was reading, and then going to her class and reading some strange things in Norse mythology. And I began to think that maybe my brain cells were lighting up, maybe these were the same kinds of things as the Norse mythology, these stories. Now, I still wanted to be a good Christian and have that Christian glow on my face when I sang in the choir. I can still do it. I'll demonstrate. My heart wanted to believe it all, but my mind was pushing back. And add to that the mix of the hormones that come at this age, and first love, and first real heartbreak, with no help from my prayers to Jesus, who was supposed to be my Savior. He didn't bring my boyfriend back. I cried almost every night my 9th grade year. But then I started hanging out with Sammy Johnson and the Motorcycle Boys, and I felt a little better. If you knew me in high school, you would have described me as an outgoing, fun-loving, motorcycle-riding, boy-loving kind of girl who was also extremely dedicated to her church and her faith. All of that was very confusing. I could not decide whether I was better suited to becoming a Hell's Angel or a nun. Seriously, that's how confused I was. I decided after a while, though, that the Hell's Angel or nunnery possibilities weren't realistic. But I was determined that I was going to leave Statesboro. My English teachers had convinced me that I was a pretty good writer, so I applied to the UGA's Henry Grady School of Journalism. And I was going to go up there and have a good time at that party school. And then after I finished, I was going to head to Atlanta and work for the Atlanta Journal. I was going to be Brenda Starr, investigative reporter. Then, along came Fred Page. The Page boys, Fred, Vic, and Will, were also active in First Baptist Church. Fred finished high school in 1965 and attended a couple of other schools for post-secondary work before being accepted into Georgia Southern College. I was a senior at Statesboro High, And that fall of 1967, Fred asked me to go with him to the Starlight Ball at Georgia Southern. To get the chance to go to a college ball with a handsome guy was too good to pass up. I went. He charmed me, and that was that. My acceptance to the journalism school at the University of Georgia came in the mail, but I was too much in love to do that. So I decided I would remain in Statesboro and attend Georgia Southern with Fred. He asked me to marry him. I'm a senior in high school, y'all. He asked me to marry him, and I accepted, thinking that it would still be years away. But we kept moving it up, and sort of eloped June 12th, 1968, just days after my high school graduation and the day before I registered for my first classes at Georgia Southern. Now, I say we sort of eloped because I took my parents with us to Allendale, South Carolina. After all, I was just 17, too young to marry even in South Carolina without my parents' signature.
Is that my phone?
I don't know, John. If it is, you can turn it off. Everybody,
I don't think it is.
It's red.
Got it. Okay, good. So I had to have my parents with us. Now, Fred and I both majored in elementary education. He went from being a poor student to being a good one. And I went from not only became a better student, I became a pretty good tutor as well. We continued our journey together through 3 degrees at Georgia Southern and our doctoral degrees at Mississippi State. Now, Fred and I remained active in First Baptist and with the College Student Union when we were in college. So, actually, when we were in college, that's when I got my first opportunity to preach. First opportunity to preach. It was in a little building that looked kind of like this. Shh, no one was supposed to know. Okay? At that time, the Baptist Student Union conducted Sunday services at the Bullitt County Prison Camp. During the summer, most of the students left, and Fred and I volunteered to continue the services during the summer. Now, what was supposed to happen? He was supposed to preach, and I was going to play the piano, right? Yeah. Well, Fred was actually pretty open to me taking over the pulpit, and I did, you know. He didn't mind that. The guys in prison didn't mind, and that's what counted to us. Now, Fred was actually pretty open to me being a little different, because, you know, women were not supposed to preach at all, okay? But he was okay with that. But he was more concerned with what people thought, what other people thought about us. And we had at least seemed to be a traditional couple. And Lord, I tried. I stayed home with our 2 boys when they were babies, and I even took a workshop at First Baptist about at least acting like you were submissive. It was called The Total Woman. Maribel Morgan. Some of you may never heard of that. Needless to say, I was not their model student. It just didn't take with me. And Fred seemed okay with that, as long as we looked traditional enough. They must have approved at the Baptist Church because they invited Fred to be ordained as a deacon when he was just 27. And that's pretty young to be asked to be a deacon. Now, my own spiritual growth and development was complicated. On the outside, it looked terrific. When I was in my 20s, I was president of the Baptist Young Women, a regular in the church choir, the pianist for one of our children's choirs, a teacher of Mission Friends, and a Sunday school teacher of 8th grade girls. But I was continuing my journey that I'd started as a young teenager of reading, studying, and thinking for myself. And I was changing. I was becoming more liberal socially, politically, and of course theologically. I would share just enough of my new ideas with folks at church to remain in good standing, but they suspected I was falling out of line, and my husband knew it. Are we there yet? As young parents, we heard that often from the back seat of our car, from our 2 boys, Fred and John, when we traveled to visit relatives, or maybe going to ball games and family vacations. But this refrain, are we there yet, is also a good header for this part of my life. Because I was always moving, working, hurrying, and scurrying. I began work as an assistant professor at Georgia Southern in 1979. I'd worked at in the public schools as a teacher, and I became an assistant professor after I got my doctorate, shortly before my 29th birthday, and resolved to be a full professor by the time I was 40. No time to waste. Our children were enrolled in the laboratory school next door to the College of Education, which was awesome for us. Fred also worked in the College of Education, and we continued the partnership we had as students by doing all of our research together, publishing together. He put his name first one time, I put my name first the next time. Our primary research during that time was about the teacher shortage, the growing teacher shortage in Georgia that we were having at that time. As we milked our data on our surveys that we'd sent out for other presentations and publication opportunities, and we decided to report on subgroups. We can milk it further. So we did it by teaching disciplines, by age, by gender, race, those kinds of things. And that's when I began to receive what was a higher calling, because I became committed to working through my research to publicize what had been a devious method for resegregating the schools in Bullitt County. Not just Bullitt County, many of the counties around were doing it as well. Many in the South were doing it. And that was the academic tracking of children from as early as kindergarten. They would give them a little test, and they'd say, okay, you're in another group, next group, next group, next group, next group, you know. Although if you were important enough, you could have a child moved up. So the lower groups were black almost all, but the higher groups were white. It was resegregation. In my late 30s, qualitative methods had become more acceptable in educational research. I began to interview African American teachers as part of my research. As I interviewed one teacher who shared her experiences of not only students being tracked, but teachers as well, tears came to her eyes. And I thought, I cannot just research this stuff and present it. There's my book. I cannot just research this stuff and publish it and present it. That is not enough. So I came out as an activist for change, and I haven't stopped since. And this, I believe, is where my partnership with my husband became strained. He was openly supportive of me, but he questioned me on my ideas when we were at home. He too believed in equality, he said, but did I also think it was okay for blacks and whites to marry? Of course, I said. And I added same-gender couples to my approval list as well. Fred wasn't there yet, and he did not like that I thought differently than him. He said, we are married. If we're going to have a strong marriage, we should think alike. I replied, well, I don't see it that way. Maybe we're like yin and yang, you know. Maybe our differing views complement each other. It had been okay with him in the past, but now, you see, my differing views were being made more and more public. The next thing you know, I might be pushing for changes at church. And I did. On August 9, 1992, I know that date because I kept a journal back then. On August 9, 1992, our pastor preached a sermon indicating that the Bible was an authority and was inerrant. In my couples Sunday school class the following Sunday, couples adult Sunday school class, I presented information which challenged his message. I included lists of things in the Bible that would have been difficult for this moderate group to believe, and I added verses related to women's subservience to that list as well. I was calling out my pastor from my little Sunday school pulpit. My public witness door was open now in the church as well, and I wasn't going back in the closet. For I felt that my work was making a difference. Meanwhile, I was being promoted at work and had become the chair of a department that would change as well. The department grew from a small group of mostly old men who did no research to a vibrant, diverse group of free-thinking guys and gals who developed a doctoral program that leaned even further to the left than I did. Mm-hmm. And I was becoming known at the university for not only being a hard-working woman, but as someone who would stand up for faculty and students, for folks in education, and for the oppressed. Yes, that would later get me in trouble. But for now, I felt like I was flying high with those Eagles, winning those championships. I was even back on a motorcycle. Like Helen Reddy, I was woman, strong and invincible. at least at work. There was a perfume advertisement that was popular back then with a woman I tried to identify with.
8-hour perfume for that 24-hour woman.
I can feel the bacon. I'll shoot you right up in the pan. And never, never, never let you forget your man. 'Cause I'm a woman.
Marjorie, the 8-hour perfume for your 24-hour woman.
Indeed, I was bringing home the bacon, but it became less and less interested in frying up in the pan. We had a lot of bad fast food. But in terms of keeping my husband happy, I did try. I will not share what lengths I went to try, but I did try. However, the failure of me and our boys not fitting his idea of what this Baptist family should be seemed to cause a problem. And in fact, he became depressed that we weren't that perfect kind of family and fit in a perfect way. His only relief from this depression seemed to be running away to Brunswick, Georgia. This is where he came, y'all, where he could always arrange for night classes with teachers working on their master's degree, and days on the beach, and evenings after class, receiving warm fuzzies from graduate students enamored with his charm. That's how he kept his sanity. I begged him to see a marriage counselor with me, knowing that his extracurricular activities were not the cause of the problem, but the result. He refused. I kept my sanity through working and reading. Although I did read theology, philosophy, and psychology, my biggest revelations came through reading radical fiction, especially the writings of Tom Robbins. This was also the phase of my life where I discovered Unitarian Universalism and sent off for the materials, hoping they would come in a plain brown wrapper. Y'all, I hid them in the bathroom drawer under the feminine sanitary supplies with my other reading contraband. Eventually, things at First Baptist got too difficult. Because of my social justice activities in the community and my push for equality for women, I was literally shunned by many. I mean, they would see me in the hall and turn around and walk the other way. After one study group meeting, which I encouraged and made a recommendation, which the ones I was in were shaking their head, to study the role of women in the church. Just study it, I said. I was confronted by the chairman of the board of deacons and by the pastor, who demanded that I withdraw the recommendation. He let me know this. He said, "Jane, I have to follow the power in this church, and that's not you." I decided to move on, not for my marriage, but for my church, which had been a meaningful part of my life. But I knew I couldn't go to UU. That would mean the end of my marriage. So I joined Pittman Park United Methodist Church because I'd heard they had a liberal Sunday school class. I also joined their choir and began training as a Methodist lay minister. After getting that certification, they would let me, they were more liberal than we were, but still, I could preach at night at the evening services, y'all. They would let me preach at night, which I did. But you know, even though that was a good place for me, I call it my halfway house. That was my halfway house. It was a good place in some ways. The doctrine was still stifling. My friend Sherry Barr was going to that class too, but would have to leave a little early to go to the UU church. I was jealous because I knew that's where I really wanted to be. But I had to think of my family. And we continued for a while to have that happy family appearance to the community. But we struggled at home. My sons had especially problematic teen and young adult years. I was constantly in a fix-it mode for them. And my in-laws were very sick. And of course, their own son that lived in the community was off in Brunswick. So that was very difficult. Our lives were getting more depressing. And I told no one about it. And instead screamed at the trees at night when I needed an outlet. my awakening. My religious reading included Buddhism, but I never thought I would have the kind of enlightening experience that the Buddha had had. Perhaps mine's not comparable, but I tell you, I did wake up on Christmas Day, 1997. I remember the spot where I was standing. I was holding my grandson, JD, who was almost a year old, on my hip. It was his very first Christmas, but his grandfather wasn't there. Fred had left the night before, saying he was just too severely depressed to be with us. And it was Christmas, y'all. And we were all depressed. Then it just fell on me. I mean, just fell on me. I woke up. And for the first time in my life, I realized that we didn't have to live this way. I said it out loud. I said, we don't have to live this way. We're going to get a divorce. My life changed after that. I changed everything. I colored my hair, not this color, but I colored my hair. That wasn't quite in back then. I colored my hair, I remodeled my house, and I at last became a Unitarian Universalist. I love Unitarian Universalists. Indeed, I describe this religion as my salvation. I was not born with the gift of unquestioning faith like some, but y'all, I was born with the need for religious community. I found a home at UU. Here at a place where I could ask questions, share my doubts, and affirm my commitments and my values. And the audience had become so important to me. This was a place I could do that. I also met Greg at UU. Yeah. At the UU in Statesboro. Before I became a minister, y'all, maybe make that clear. I wasn't his minister. So I met Greg. Greg walked in there to the church with this is after his divorce. He walked in with his two small children, and Greg and I hit it off, and his children hit it off with my grandson. I had just one at the time. Oh, and what a support he has been on this journey. And UU was a place where my LGBTQ friends could come and be out. Hallelujah. To use one of my dad's phrases, I was in hog heaven. Now, because I'd been a lay minister at the Methodist Church, I sought to continue some kind of lay ministry with the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Statesboro. And folks there were glad to have me to fill their pulpit for free and take on other responsibilities. And it wasn't long, y'all, before I realized that these activities were becoming more important to me than my job at Georgia Southern. So I made an appointment with a nice human resources lady to see if it would be possible to retire with full benefits. And I learned that I could retire in 2005. I was just 54 in 2005, almost 55 in the fall of 54. So I began to look at the possibility of going to seminary and becoming a real minister. It would not be easy, and it would not be inexpensive either, but it was possible. The congregation agreed to be my sponsor, and I was accepted in the Meadville Lombard Theological School. That was in Chicago. They made sure we were up there every January so they could see how strong and committed we were. I would be able to complete most of my coursework and my clinical pastoral counseling unit that I got in Atlanta by the time I retired. And then I would only have 1 year left of internship. I did that in Augusta. I stayed away from the church that year, went to Augusta, did my internship. And then I had to jump all of the MFC hoops that we know so much about, and some of us know a good bit about. That's what I was going to do. That was the plan, and it became my reality. I jumped through all of UUA's hopes for preliminary fellowship in March of 2006. And immediately let the folks at UUFS know. They had a meeting of the congregation and called me as their minister. I began on July 1st, 2006, and was ordained and installed that September and remained their minister for 19 years. Retiring last June of last year. Then, in 2014, I added to my ministry a half-time position at the Unitarian Universalists of Coastal Georgia, and I fell in love with you. I'm enjoying the fact that we have a shared ministry here, doing so many good things. You can see some pictures, I won't describe it, but we're out in the community doing so many good things. And in church, we're doing so many good things. And yes, I did continue to use my voice in both communities, advocating for peace, liberty, and justice for all. When I retired from the church in Statesboro, a member of the community said to me, "We're going to miss your voice in the community." And I said, "My voice is not retiring. You know, I'm not the minister anymore, but my voice is not retiring." And I shared the same kind of thing with you folks in Brunswick. Greg and I have become to love this congregation and this community. We will continue to be active in both Statesboro and Brunswick organizations and activities for as long as we can. I am going to need to take some kind of break, and the board is working on what that might look like. We don't know for sure, but I will be here. And I will be back. I'm not sure if I'll stay away a little while or not, or how we might work that out, because that's unknown. But y'all got me now. I'm a member of this country. I'm not going to leave. I have not been without struggles. We have not been without struggles. Yet all in all, I feel like I'm in a spiritual hog heaven. I will be grateful to both the Statesboro congregation and to you all for allowing me to minister to you and be ministered by you. We have been on quite a journey, and it keeps going. Perhaps you can invite me back in 10 years to share more of my journey. But for now, as fellow Hog Heaven inhabitant says, that's all, folks.